In this lesson, we're going to take a look at how to draw a bird using Derwent colored pencils. We're going to start by lightly and loosely drawing with an HB graphite pencil on Bristol paper, and I'm using the vellum surface here. We're just going to lightly and loosely define the shapes of the bird in the early stages before lifting off some of the graphite using a kneaded eraser. As I mentioned, we're going to be using the Derwent Studio colored pencils, and these are high quality colored pencils manufactured by Derwent. I'm using a set of 12. One pencil that's missing from the set, however, is a white colored pencil, which I will substitute with a Prismacolor, and I'm also going to be using a colorless blender also manufactured by Prismacolor. We're going to start in the area of the eye, and I'm going to begin by layering colors to create a natural looking black. I'm going to start with copper beech and then layer over the top of that with Prussian blue. Next, I'm going to go ahead and create somewhat of an underpainting in this area using the copper beech, just defining some of the darker values initially before revisiting a few of these areas with Prussian blue. Now the beak is really dark, so I'm going to go over the top of that with Prussian blue and go ahead and darken up that area. And at the edge of the beak and just underneath the eye, there's a little bit of a yellower color, so I'm going to use a bit of golden brown to create that natural looking yellow. Now I'll move on to creating some of the undertones on the head of the bird using Spectrum Blue before revisiting that with Prussian blue. So we're actually using two blues here. And progressively, I'm going to get a bit darker or a bit heavier with the mark. I found that Derwent pencils really lend themselves to gradually building up the tone, which allows for a lot of layering of colors before you get to that point where burnishing becomes easy. So I'm using the colorless blender in between applications to just add a bit more wax to the surface. Another thing I've noticed with the Derwent pencils is that the black really lends itself for making values darker in a natural way. Some blacks are a bit strong and can overpower an image. With the Derwent pencils, the black is not that way. It's a more of a natural black. So I'm going to be using the black quite a bit in this drawing. In most circumstances, I avoid black as much as possible and just mix a natural black. But the black used here is pretty natural. And as we start to get a nice amount of wax built up on the surface, the colors become a bit more bold and a bit stronger as they cover up some of the tooth of the paper. I'm still going to be using quite a bit of the white Prismacolor pencil. As you can see here, I'm lightening up the top of the head, and I'm going to go ahead and intensify the highlight in the center portion of the eye. Now we'll move our way down to the middle part of the bird, and again I'm going to create somewhat of an underpainting using the copper beech, and in this case I'm going to add just a couple touches of red using Crimson Lake, and then I'm going to go over the top of that again with the golden brown. I'm also going to use the white colored pencil to burnish areas as we go as well. I'll use the colorless blender quite a bit, but also the white can burnish the pencil nicely. As I make strokes, I'm trying to follow the cross contours of the bird, so the strokes are going to flow over the contours of the form of the bird. Now we'll add a bit of shadow, and I'm going to add this shadow again using the copper beech, the Prussian blue, and then darken it with the ivory black. So there are some major differences between colored pencils, of course, and the Derwent brand colored pencils, like I mentioned, really lend themselves to layering gradually. Prismacolor are super waxy, so you can really build up the color very quickly, but some people don't like that. Some people like to have a little bit more control over the layering and allow that layering process to be a bit more gradual. With the Derwent pencils, I find that that layering process is quite a bit more gradual, and some people are going to find that gives them a bit more control over the colors that they create on the surface. And you can see here how natural the black is. It's not overpowering, it's not too strong. You can gradually build up that black to create natural looking shadows. I'm also layering this black over an area that I've already applied white colored pencil. That's why it may look a bit gray initially, but then we can go back and darken that up. We actually don't want it to be solid black in this area underneath the bird. We want it to look like it's an area of white feathers just with a bit of shadow. All right, let's move our way to the wing here. And again, we're going to start with a bit of that spectrum blue initially. I'm going to have some variations in value as I initially put this color down on the surface. And then again, we'll go back with the Prussian blue and start to make some of the areas a bit darker, define a bit of the texture on the back of the bird, as well as some of the wings and how they overlap each other. And here again, just like we did on the body portion of the bird, we're trying to make the strokes flow with the cross contours of the wings. And here I'm burnishing this application before going any further. Now with a good bit of wax on the surface, we can go back with the black and it will produce a very natural, darker version of the blue. Right around the edge of the wing, there are some black markings, so we're going to be a little bit more vigilant with the marks that we make in this area and let that black be a bit crisper. And I'm putting a relatively heavy amount of pressure here on the pencil. As I mentioned, Derwent pencils really lend themselves to gradual building up of the color. So if you have an area that you really want to be strong with color and intense with color, you're going to have to put a bit more pressure on the pencil. We'll just continue those markings down to the tail feather area of the bird. One benefit to using the Derwent pencils is the amount of time that the pencil stays sharp. With softer colored pencil brands like Prismacolor Premier pencils, the pencil is going to dull relatively easily. You don't really see that here with the Derwent Studio pencils. The pencil stays sharp for a longer period of time, allowing you to produce details. I'm going to go back here with the white Prismacolor pencil and just lighten up a few areas. Again, with the black, I'm going to create a bit of shadow underneath each one of these tail feathers just to create a bit more of the illusion of form and to separate each one of these feathers a bit further. All right, now let's move on to the leg of the bird here. And I'm going to start initially with the ivory black, just adding a few areas of shadow and then a light application over the whole shape of the upper portion of the leg before burnishing that area with the white. Then I'll go back again with the ivory black and darken up some of the shadowed areas. We'll move on to the lower portion of the leg, and there's a high bit of contrast in this area. So again, I'm going to use ivory black and then burnish that area with a bit of white and create a bit more contrast. The high contrast continues down in the area of the talon of the bird. So again, we're going to start initially with ivory black and just define those areas of shadow and a bit of texture. Again, we're going to follow the cross contours of the form of the talon as we add those marks. Now, I'm not going to leave it just with the ivory black. I'm going to go back with a bit of the copper beech just to warm that area up just a bit. And then I'll go back and burnish that, the highlighted areas rather, with a bit of the white Prismacolor pencil. Now we can start to define the shape of the shadow that's happening on the branch here. Again, initially with ivory black, but I do want to warm this area up. I don't want it to be completely black, so an application of copper beech follows. Then we can start to define some of the texture on the branch. The light source is originating from the left side, so the left side of the branch is going to be a bit lighter, and the right side of the branch, of course, is going to be a bit darker. We'll warm up this application with copper beech before burnishing again with the white Prismacolor pencil. Then we can go back with the ivory black and make some of those shadows a bit stronger, increasing the contrast and defining that texture a bit further. And you'll really find that once you've got a good amount of wax on the surface, you can really layer those details right on top. I'm also going to use a bit of the mineral green color here just to make a bit more of a natural look to the branch. I don't want it to be necessarily a stark gray. I do want it to have a bit of a natural tone associated with it. So a light application of that mineral green gets that done. And then we'll address the back edge of the branch the same way we did the first part, by first layering the ivory black, adding a bit of warmth with the copper beech, then burnishing that area with a white Prismacolor before going back with the ivory black, and then lastly with the mineral green. And then our drawing of a bird is complete using Derwent colored pencils. If you're interested in learning more about colored pencils, I encourage you to check out the colored pencil course, which includes 22 modules completely devoted to learning how to draw with colored pencils. We cover landscape drawing, still life, portraiture, all different types of colored pencil techniques and applications, as well as watercolor pencils, combining watercolor with colored pencils, and each module includes an illustrated ebook to help you learn more efficiently. If you want to learn more about the colored pencil course, just click on the video that you're seeing right here in the center of your screen. There's over 5 hours of video instruction, 22 modules, and 21 ebooks. I encourage you to check the colored pencil course out if you want to learn more about drawing with colored pencils.